Hey, rock and roll fans. Thanks for joining me today. It's Aaron Live. It's a last second live stream. It's November 4th. God, can you believe it? We're just like 6 weeks away from, well, 7 weeks away from Christmas, somewhere in the neighborhood. It's unbelievable. But here we are. And let's see who's here. Hey, Jeff Stout was first in the house. You know what you get for that, Jeff? Nothing. But thanks for coming. JP Roca is here. K Manifesto gives us the old what's up. Ravens. Saber is helloing to everybody. Look at, I go live and 10 seconds later the phone does its thing. Oh, my son. Because it's lunchtime and so he's like texting me. Okay. Micra's here. Jeff Stout. Oh, okay. We already said Jeff Stout was here. Kevin Thomas is here. Oh, there's all sorts of conversation going on. Leg Kick is here because Leg Kick is almost always here. Kyle, not Kevin. Thanks for joining us. Jeff Potts. Eric Johansson. Hail Irie. Oh, but also this. I don't want to talk about that anymore. I'm still scarred from it. My goodness. Jeff's, what's he taking up the Mike Miller mantle and trying to start a revolution here? My goodness. Okay. Excellent. Everybody's saying hi to everybody in the chat. It's just like one big happy family. So let me do a quick public service announcement before we get too deep into anything here. So watch your monitors for this, please. I was supposed to do that. Okay, there I did it. So yeah, please like and subscribe to the channel. I can't do this without your support, and I appreciate it that I get it all the time, and you guys are awesome, and I thank you for it. But if you're new here, hit the like button, subscribe, be a part of the Aaron Live family, and you can always ask yourself, why did I subscribe to this channel, and never be able to answer that question. But it's always good fun, and so I guess that's something. Okay, I know you guys are out there and you're asking yourself, well, as if I need to tell you, I'm working on this. This is Wraith of God. This is my massive graphic novel that's still funding on Indiegogo for those of you. It's kind of what we call our in-demand or our store phase, where the initial fundraising is over, but we're still taking orders on the book. And so you can still get in on the action of this. We'll be showing some art from that today here in just a minute and working on some art. But the link to this campaign is actually in the description of this video. So you might want to go there if you haven't yet and check that out. There's a couple of cover options, that one. Then there's the cover B, the old 1972 Marvel retro version of the cover, which is available. There's also another one of our female heroine in the story, Esther. There's a cover for her that I don't have up here for some reason. There's also this trading card that is available that actually only the people that signed up early for the campaign will be getting this for free, but there will be some extra copies for those of you who are card completists and must have this card. You'll be able to purchase it for, I don't know, not a ton of money. I don't know what I'm going to charge for it yet, but it won't be, huge. But there'll be some available, like, excuse me, about 100 extras, I think. This is a limited edition mini print. This will be signed and numbered that you have available to get as well in the campaign. That actually does cost money. This is the Esther card that everybody will be getting, though, that buys anything on the campaign. You buy a book, you get this card for free. And there's several other things you'll be getting for free. A sticker set of the Loprestiverse characters. There'll be there's another mini print that actually will be free that comes with this, that kind of previews the next Wraith adventure. And there's some interior things in the book that have been added on that are as kind of like bonus things that, of course, everybody will be getting because it'll be in every book, including a Lopresti-verse value stamp trading stamp. What am I trying to say? What were they called? The old, I guess, value stamps. Anyway, they'll be in a, yeah, forget it. I shouldn't even brought it up because I can't speak about it, apparently. All right. So anyway, let's take, I've got some colored pages from Gabe Eltiabe, who is doing the coloring for this book now. And so let's take a look at what he did. The first two pages, the first three pages I had colored by somebody else at the very beginning of the campaign to put up on the campaign page. And but then when it came time to do the book, I actually hired Gabe to come in and color the book. And so he recolored those pages. And so let's take a look at what he did. There's page number 1. We have our band of outlaws hanging around the campfire as it starts to get dark. Then our buddy the Wraith shows up, serve them a little justice. And those are the first two pages. I've already posted those on the campaign page. But then here's the third page that I just got today, where the Wraith is, you know, it doesn't waste any time by putting a bullet through this dude's head and into the fire he goes. The other two guys are like, yeah, I'm getting out of here. But you can't escape the Wraith, as this guy's about to find out. But anyway, so those are the first 3 pages colored by our good friend Gabe. And there's more coming. So that's what I'm working on. Oh, and also this. Now, I've been saying for a while this is a Swedish publisher, but this is actually a Austrian publisher. So I take it back. He's from the land of Arnold. And I'll be actually meeting with this guy, or I have a conference call with him in a few days to discuss when this is coming out and actually doing perhaps more with this character. So there'll be more information coming up on that as well. So that's kind of what I'm working on. And now I'm going to work on the comments section because I'm like way behind on it. Okay. A lot of conversation going on amongst yourself. That's fine. What about is here? Says Ahoy, Aaron. Ahoy. Thanks for joining us. K Manifesto giving me a plug. Appreciate it. Jeff's digging Gabe's colors. I hope you all are. I think they look pretty cool. There you go. Aaron Louviere. You want to chime in too and say those are awesome looking pages. Aaron Live is almost as good as the Chick-fil-A sandwich I just finished eating. Oh, you know, this is kind of funny that because Fox Mulder, he actually bought himself into the comic and gets the original art from that page. So did K Manifesto. And I just finished working them into the script. So K Manifesto will be playing poker in one of the scenes. And Fox Mulder actually will be a customer in the House of Ill Repute. So those are the pages you guys will be starring in, featuring in. You guys get your names mentioned actually in the story, and you get a few lines. So that should be fun. Okay, let's see. AJ Tom, don't you always say that? Hey, I finally caught a stream. This is the first time you've been caught a stream. Oh, look at that. There's some Chick-fil-A going around. Man, now see, I haven't had lunch yet. Now I'm getting hungry. There's no Chick-fil-A is not close to me. It is like it's a drive, and so it's like I will not be having Chick-fil-A for lunch. Well, they do in my story, pal. Sweden would be better. I'm guessing Eric Johansson is actually Swedish, is what I'm guessing there. Kyle says, not Kyle, not Kevin with Comics Elite. I did an interview with him not too long ago that's posted up on YouTube. If you haven't seen that, you should check that out. Pages look awesome. Thank you, sir. Okay. Okay. It's time, I think, for a little bit of show and tell. um, now look at this book. We had, I think it was the last second live stream where we discussed let me give you Kirby's drawing of the Hulk and how many fingers and toes. Now, if you look at this, Hulk has 4 fingers, and we assume a thumb on there, right? But he only has 4 toes. So Kirby was like, I'll give him all 5, all 4 fingers and a thumb, and then I'll give him 4 toes and call it good. But here's the thing that kind of pisses me off about this book. I traded for this book almost 20 years ago, maybe, when I was still in Florida for CrossGen with a dealer there from Yancey Street Comics. His dad had come across this comic, and he's like, hey, do you want to, I don't know how much he wanted for it at the time, but I was like, it ended up I trading a Hulk versus Thor commission for this comic. And I really thought this baby was in like a, like an 8.0 condition when I got it. Now, as you can see, it's browning a little bit around the sides and the edges. But that's not really a gradable, that's not really a gradable offense, because these grades are all based on structure and not aesthetic. So the cover can tan a little bit as long as it's not, just natural tanning, from age. And that doesn't necessarily count against the grade. So this, I really thought this was probably like an 8 when I made the deal. And it came back as 6.5, so I was kind of pissed off. And I wouldn't have got it graded if I knew it was going to come back as 6.5. I just would have left it in the bag. But being an older book, I thought, I'll go get it graded, because I really figured it's going to be a 7, it's somewhere between a 7.5 and an 8.5, and it came back as 6.5, so I was pissed. So I've learned my lesson. I don't send books in to get graded anymore, because I'm always disappointed. So I'll buy graded books, but I'm not going to take ones out of my collection and send them in and get them graded, because I always get pissed off at what it comes back as. So they find little nicks and stuff in there you can't even see with the naked eye. So anyway, so that's that. I like this. Will there be a she-wolf? Yeah, sure. Let me just tell you the whole story. You don't need to read the book. I'll just tell you everything that happens in it. Oh, I'm not telling you anything. You have to read it to find out. Oh, well, you know what? I've got this strange craving that just started up like a couple weeks ago for like Taco Bell. And I don't really know why. We used to, when my kids were little, we used to do that like Taco Bell Thursdays. We'd have like Taco Bell every Thursday night. And then after a while, we said, this is not healthy. So we quit doing it. But then just recently, I've been kind of on a Taco Bell sort of craving thing. I don't know. I'm going to have to see if I can fight it off. You're here to announce WRAITH will ship by the weekend. By the way, awesome to hear Gabe was coloring. Can't wait till Friday. Yeah, it'll be shipping on the weekend, but not this weekend. Is that a new table or just cleaned up the area? No, this is Shelly got me a drafting table that I could sit right next to the computer. So look at the messy table, what you guys are used to seeing, is that. And it's still there, all messy. But this is not messy because it's a drafting table. And it's sitting right there. Ooh, there's some pens, so I'm going to do something here very special very quickly. Taco Bell is bad juju, boy. Yeah, she'll have very shapely and clean-shaven legs. Bad Past Master Dan, are you a Florida guy? Do you know the Yancey Street Boys? Yeah, don't bring slabs. Yeah, I know, but it's kind of like gum. Remember in school, you guys, it probably never happened to you, but it did to me and all the if somebody was caught like in grade school with gum, the teacher would say, "Are you chewing gum?" You're like, "Yes." "Did you bring enough for everyone?" That was kind of the shtick, and then you'd have to throw the gum out. Um, Kevin Thomas says Gabe officially joining CG is the best Christmas present this year. He's a heck of a colorist, and he's super busy all of a sudden. It's kind of funny. Well, Tom, yeah, they don't open now, but they did. I mean, I don't want you guys to think I'm like a collector snob. I am a little bit, but I have 95, maybe 98% of my collection is unslabbed books. I have like maybe 40 slabbed books. But when I buy high-end books that cost a lot of money, I'm not taking a chance that they're going to there's the grade is subjective. I need to know for sure that I'm getting what I'm paying for, so I will buy slabbed books if they're expensive. All right. Okay. All right, so let's take a look at what am I working on today? I'm working on page 12. Okay, I've shown you guys the first first 5 pages of Wraith of God have been out there. And but I'm not showing you the rest of that scene. But here we're setting up the town of Calamity, Arizona, which of course is a made-up town, that will be featured, the main spot for this, where the story takes place. So okay, that's as much as I can zoom. So I'm going to finish inking that middle panel right there, but we're going to take a look at these panels one by one. And this is one of these pages that is a pain in the butt because it's a ton of work, and yet you know that people are just going to flip by it, and it's going to be not that significant in someone's mind as they're reading it, and yet it's so important because it basically, this is the establishing shot of the town where the story takes place. So you have Welcome to Calamity, that's the name of the town. So I had to draw indications of the buildings and stuff. So my vanishing point for this is like right there. Okay, because we're basically, if we had a camera shot, we'd be laying on the ground with the camera looking straight ahead. And so like this is like the top of a little hill here. So you can see the ruts from the wagon train or something there, or a stagecoach that maybe went through there. And so then it goes down, and then it goes back up, and it goes up the hill here. So it's a little bit tricky, but and it's in Arizona, so I got some kind of Arizona rocks in there. So we cut to a little girl basically saying, "Are you the new sheriff?" And he's like, "Yeah." He's sort of a Clint Eastwood type, as you can see. It's not a direct portrait of Clint Eastwood, but he kind of has that feel. And so then they're talking outside the sheriff's office here in town. We get in a little closer, see some of the old town folk walking about. And then, of course, here's the kind of a shot of the main street downtown there in Calamity. Now, up here on the hill is a graveyard. And those of you who have seen the Magnificent Seven, this is kind of based, the setup of this town is based on the town that were the Magnificent Seven, not the one they protected, but where they originally stopped at and when they got together. And there's a graveyard up on the hill, and it was the same case in the Magnificent Seven. And I like the way the town's set up because I needed a graveyard outside of town, and then there's a little figure right there. You can't hardly. There he is, standing right there. And he's an important character in the story, and he lives just outside of town. And so I thought, well, I'm going to steal that sort of design from that town in the Magnificent Seven, where the town's here and it kind of goes up the hill, and the graveyard's up at the top of the town there on that hill, because it worked out perfectly for my story. Then we got another close up, a little kind of a Clint Eastwood close up of this guy. And kind of what I did here is I did heavy blacks around the eye and the detail in the eye, but then I cross-hatched the crap out of it, okay? Because I didn't want it to be solid black. I wanted to see some of this guy to kind of give it, that squinty eye, that kind of, again, that's sort of reminiscent of Clint Eastwood. And I did a little bit of that here on this, where I did some solid blacks, but then did some line work and some crosshatch right in here to open that up so we could see a little bit of his expression, rather than just making this solid black, right? Because then that would be all black shadow and that's all you'd see. So anyway, he has this little conversation with this little nosy little girl that gives us some information we need. And so anyway, this page I've been working on this freaking page for 3 days, and it's really ticking me off because I usually don't spend that much time on a single page, but you can imagine I had to pull all sorts of reference to get the buildings, and whenever you're dealing with this type of perspective and a bunch of different characters and a bunch of different details for the town, and it's an 8-panel page too. It was originally a 10-panel page, and I was like, what the heck was I thinking? Because I knew I would never be able to fit everything I needed in 10 panels. So I went back and found some spots where I realized I had wasted. I had made too many panels. It was just like, these don't need, every one of these shots doesn't need to be broken up like this. And so this is a combined, this last panel here was actually 2 panels, but it didn't need to be 2 panels. So I made it 1. And I made these panels up here insets, because they're basically just, all she says here is, "Are you the new sheriff?" And he says, "Yeah." And that's it. So they don't need a ton of room for dialogue balloon placement. And I was going to make, this opening shot the entire width of the page, but I also realized that was unnecessary as well. Because I'm not somebody, I don't like to end scenes in the middle of a page. Okay. So if I let this scene breathe more, like saying, give it more panels, I didn't want to stick 10 panels on this page, but let's say I had, let's say I'd made this the whole upper panel there, and then moved these 2 down here, and then maybe, move some of this stuff around, and took these bottom panels perhaps and put them on the next page. Okay. The problem is, now you've got probably a scene that's going to end right in the middle of a page, which I don't like to do. I don't think it's comfortable to do that. I like the scene to end, and then you turn the page and you're in a new scene. Okay, that's not necessarily comic book law, but it was a conversation I had with Howard Chaykin many years ago, and something that he said, and then something that I happen to agree with as well. And so when, and of course we discussed this, that's something you can only control if you're writing the script, right? Because someone writes the script and has a scene change right in the middle, what are you going to do as the artist, right? But if you're writing it, it's something I think to avoid, unless there's like a transition. Like I have some scenes where you'll get halfway through the page and the character will go into flashback, and the next half of the page is part of that flashback. And I think that works okay, because it's really still part of the same scene, even though you're flashing back. But anyway, and I didn't want to turn this into a 2-page sequence because it's not that important. It is in the sense that there's information being related here that we all need. We need to know, we have to introduce the sheriff because he's an important character. We have to introduce this guy up here on the hill because he's an important character. And then there's some dialogue about the stagecoach coming in and the full moon and all this kind of interesting stuff that sort of ties into what's coming up. But you don't want to stretch a scene like this into 2 pages uh, because frankly, it gets boring, right? So get the information into 1 page, do it in a way that, maybe it's a full page, which this certainly is, but I don't think it feels cramped. It's just a full page there's no action, so you're not looking for a huge big panel. Um, you're just, you just want the panels to be large enough that they support the storytelling. And also, if you've got, in this case, you're going to have a few word balloons in here because there's a lot of talking. So you want enough space to make sure you get the word balloons in, right? And that's what I've done here. There's plenty of space on either side of these 2 little characters who are talking. Yeah, you're going to cover up some of the building, which, oh well. But you've got dead space in here to put balloons. And then, of course, in the middle of town here, I put all the people that are standing around. They're sort of out of the way, right? Because he's pointing up at the guy on the hill who we want to bring attention to. But we've also got all this space in here for word balloons. Okay. And then he's got 1 line here. She has a couple lines, but we've got all this space that we can use right in here to drop in word balloons and not cover up anything significant. And then again, here, look at all this space I have. And you say, well, that feels a little loaded on the left-hand side, but the reality is word balloons are going to be all in here. And so taking into consideration there's going to be word balloons there helps when it goes to print. This will be a balanced panel, okay, where right now it's a little imbalanced because all the weight is right here, but those word balloons will go in here and fill up that space. So anyway, that's that. Eric wants to know, why are you doing close-ups before the street scene? Because it's typical TV, pardon the expression, but TV storytelling. If you're looking at it filmically, to establishing shot, 3/4 close-up, establishing shot, 3/4 close-up, and that's just, to me, that's boring and that is predictable storytelling, right? A lot of times, I even did this sometimes in film school where I would reverse those elements. Okay, so we go in first for the close-ups and then we pull back to see where they're at. Okay, to me, that's far more interesting than doing exactly what you expect, which is, go from here to here to here. That's basic TV directing, and I reject it. It's like, starting in the close-up of a book, right? And then pulling back to reveal the guy's in a library, rather than establishing the library and then going into close-up of a guy reading a book. Okay? As long as you get the elements that you need to clarify the storytelling within a few panels, then it doesn't really matter. You can be clever. You can start with a close-up and then pull back to reveal where we're at, as opposed to going the other direction, which, we've set up the town. And then, so we're going to assume that these 2 characters are talking in the town someplace, because why else would I establish the town? Okay. And then we can pull back and say, oh, there they are. And this is the environment. Then we pull back really even further to set up the entire town. So we're really doing this whole thing in reverse, right? But you're still getting the information that you need to clearly tell the story. You're not lost. And if you are a bit confused right here, by the time you get down here and here, you're clearly not confused anymore. Or at least you shouldn't be. Or wallpaper would be too busy. Um, I will make sure I never make wallpaper out of it, Jeff. Um, so interesting. Love learning how comics are made and all the thought that goes into creating a comic book. Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of thought that can and does go into this stuff if you take the time to do it, which when you're doing your own project like I am, you have that time as long as you don't abuse it and end up, super late, which I'm desperately trying not to do that. Um, does Wraith have a secret identity or is he the Wraith all the time? Oh, he has an identity, but exactly who he is you have to read the whole thing to find that out. This story is it's really difficult for me because to share because it's a story that's set up with a lot of mysteries and unanswered questions that get revealed as you move along in the story. So it's not just a basic thing where you say Bruce Wayne is Batman. Let's go see the story. There's elements in this that are just they're unclear purposely that are revealed as you go along, and that's part of the fun of the story. So it's really difficult for me to answer what would seem like basic questions because so many of those basic questions are not revealed right away, and you have to sort of get into the story and hopefully I don't telegraph too much so that some of this stuff is you turn the page and go, oh wow, I didn't see that coming. Of course, now that I say that, you guys will just bombard me as soon as you get the book and go, oh, that was so predictable. I knew that was going to happen. But anyway, Southbound, thank you for the $4.99, man. I really appreciate it. I wanted to make sure that I didn't just answer your question, but also thanked you for tossing that $5 in there. That is very helpful, and I really appreciate it. Um, oh, he is a mystery. He's very much a mystery. Um, Mike Wilson Arts joined the chat. Thanks for joining us, Mike. Yeah, I could have, but I didn't. Um, she's important in this scene. You see, there's always going to be subjective choices that you make, and it's not necessarily saying something is right or wrong, right? So if Eric goes in there and goes, well, I wouldn't have made the girl that big, and I would have shown the sheriff's badge, and I would have done this, that, or the other thing, and that's totally legitimate, right? But um, that's how I didn't choose to do it that way, right? Is that right or is that wrong? Well, it's subjective. It's a matter of um, what you may think is important, whereas what someone else may think is important, right? So Eric and I may uh, have approached this differently, um, and but again, as long as the story is being told, I mean, if the girl's saying, "Are you the new sheriff?" and he says, "Yeah," then it's sort of immaterial that we see his badge at this moment, right? And but it could have been done visually, certainly, without the dialogue, and it would have been just as legitimate. Got to start watching westerns and werewolves and western movies. Oh yeah, I'm not suggesting, Eric, that you're like attacking me or anything like that. You're just trying to pick my brain to see why I'm doing what I'm doing, and that's what I mean. It's like there's always a dozen different ways you can do things, and it always comes down to your personal subjectivity. And sometimes you'll make decisions, and then maybe 5 pages later you'll say, "Geez, it would have been smarter if I'd done this," or maybe some clarity would have been more clear if I had done this. So there's a little bit of second guessing, I think, that goes into everything that you do when you're storytelling. Um, so you're always trying to step back while you're doing it. Like I laid this page out about 5 times before I decided on this layout because I thought, okay, something's not clear. There's too much jammed in here. This is uh, are people going to understand what I'm doing here? And in this case, um, uh, to me, it was more important to show his face than necessarily to show his badge. And then so I decided to go ahead and do the reveal, "Are you the sheriff?" in the dialogue as opposed to doing it visually, but I just as easily could have done it visually, right? So this is one of these things where you look at the page and you say, okay, there's a conversation between some little girl and Clint Eastwood, and they're in the town of Calamity, and he's pointing at some dude up on the hill, and they're having some conversation, and he walks away from it. Okay, that's what you get from not having dialogue in there, but you don't get that he's the sheriff without the dialogue. And so that's an interesting thing. So could I have done it if I was doing this without dialogue? Absolutely, I would have had to show his badge. Okay, but in this instance, I'm relying on the dialogue that's going to be here to help fill in a couple of blanks that I'm not doing visually. But I originally had this as a much smaller panel with her head down here looking up at him, and you could have seen his badge in that panel, and maybe that might have been a better, but I wanted to get a close-up of the guy, because you go back and forth, and maybe that was an artistic choice where I sit there and think, I really want to see this guy's face more than I want to see, the badge, right? And then I could have gone down and shown his face down here and left this open to interpretation. And who knows, maybe I'm talking myself out of it and I'll end up doing a patch right there. I don't know. But then ended up going with a super intense close-up here, as opposed to maybe just a close-up like this down here, which would have worked as well. To keep him in shadow right here. The more I talk about it, the more I think, man, it's not a bad idea. But see, that's the thing. It's like there's always a bunch of different ways you can do stuff, and then at some point you make the decision and you go with it, and then sometimes you regret it. And I do have the ability to go in and change those things, but then because I'm it's my own project, right? And I'm not on a really strict, tight deadline, but at some point, you have to move on and say, well, this is the choice I made, and I'm going to live with it. So anyway, let's go ahead, and that's my thought process anyway on the storytelling here. So what I've done was, someone asked this earlier and I haven't addressed it yet, that all these, the buildings and everything, they were all ruled out. My perspective was, because we're right over the top of these people's heads, right? So that tells us that I'm on a ladder. If I had a camera, I'm on a boom shot, right? So I'm above these people's heads by about 5 feet or so. So my vanishing point was right here at the top of the hill. And so that's what I used to create all my my lines for perspective to do the buildings in. So I drew them all out, lined them, ruled them out, and now I'm going to freehand them to give it a looser, more rougher look than going in with a ruler and doing the lines with a straight edge, because that tends to sort of look like so perfect it almost feels like a coloring book. And that's one of the things I started noticing about my work in mainstream comics, was that I would do these backgrounds and stuff, and I thought, oh, these look pretty good. And then they'd get inked, and they would, the person that inked them, usually Matt Ryan, and he's a great inker, so I'm not disparaging him in any way, shape, or form. But they would come back and they'd be perfectly ruled, sometimes heavy line weights, and it just kind of looked like a coloring book, and it didn't really have the kind of character that I wanted the background to have. And so I thought, okay, on this project, we're in the Old West. I want this to kind of look like a spaghetti Western. So I'm going to rule out all the lines, but then I'm going to freehand and as you can see, I'm using these microns, and instead of trying to, just do this one straight line and be totally in control. I'm sort of sketching the line, and it's still pretty straight, but it's going to have a little bit of wobble and some bumps on it and stuff, which is exactly what I want, because it's, this is the old West, and this stuff would not necessarily be refined. And even if it was refined, it would certainly have a bunch of wear and tear on it in short order. And so really, I'm inking this in a lot of ways like I would a sketch commission or something. And it's kind of fun. And it goes so much against my nature, because everything I do, I want to be, it's like, oh, my whole career has been perfect lines, perfect lines. Everything's got to be perfect, like Brian Boland or something, right? And you start. Steve Rude said to Gary Martin once, and this is, this is a paraphrase, but Gary Martin is a really good inker who, very precise, incredibly precise inker, just amazing control, brush inker. And he inked my stuff on sludge. And he was inking Steve Rude, and Rude was like, was trying to get him to loosen up a little bit. And he said to him, and this was what Gary told me, said to him at one point, okay, so you achieved the perfect line with a brush. Okay, then what? In other words, you're honing in this technical skill. And because it's a technical skill, at some point you're going to become perfectly proficient at the technical aspect of it. Okay, so then what's left? Well, what's left then is the artistic, right? The aesthetic. And how do you pursue the aesthetic if you're too caught up in the technical aspect of what you're doing? Okay, now it becomes, math or engineering, right? It's no longer art. And yet it gets so ingrained in you to do, oh, every line's got to be perfect, and every line's got to, and you start focusing in on the line instead of focusing on the entire picture, right? And asking yourself, what do I want this to feel like? How do I want this to be represented when it's on the page? And the funny thing is, if you do like what I'm doing right now, which is just freehand all this stuff, okay, it's not perfect. But when it gets shrunk down and printed on the page, you're not going to look at it and go, ooh, that line's a little off. You won't even notice it. But what will remain is this sort of aesthetic feel that you've created by doing it this way. So people aren't going to focus on the minor details of, is that line perfect or not? They're going to be looking at the overall picture. And the effect and the feel, the aesthetic feel that you've created with those lines. And so on one hand, it feels, as I'm doing it, it feels unfinished. It feels rough and unfinished. And then I have to keep telling myself that's what I want it to feel like. But it's so foreign to me because I've never done stuff like this before. And I think I mentioned before in other live streams that all the sketching I've done, for live streams and stuff over the past, year since, my last work for DC, um, has really sort of prepared me for this. That sketching, because I did more sketching and commissions than any actual finished comic work. And so it was like this kind of thing started becoming second nature to me. Whereas it hadn't been before. And I don't know, like I said, this is like day 3 on this page, which I really would have liked to have done in 2 days, but so I don't know if it's really saving me any time doing it this way, but it's much more comfortable because there's not the pressure to achieve the perfect line. And so if you make a line that, man, it doesn't really look all that great, it's not going to matter because it'll still fit into, the overall feel you're trying to achieve. And even some of these figures, because they're so tiny, I haven't really done a bunch of detail on them. I'm kind of drawing in the detail with my pen. Oh, brother. I'll leave that at that. Style is the mistakes made. Yeah, that's a way of looking at it. I think you're right. That's a good point. It's an excellent comment. I mean, look at look at Mike Mignola. And his backgrounds are all like free-handed and loose and stuff, but it fits so nicely with his style and what he's trying to do. Now, when I do Kit Carter, that's the space babe that you see on my banners behind me. It's going to be hard to do a kind of a humorous space story, sci-fi story like this. So it'll be interesting to see how much of this I can incorporate into that, and how much I'll have to revert to going back to being super slick. See, Garbage Man is a story that would work well with this type of approach. It's monster. It's not high tech. It's going to support some looseness. But I don't know that Kit Carter will. I mean, maybe if you look at I'll have to really think about this, because if you look at like Williamson and Frazetta when they're working at EC, and I mean that stuff is not, their line work was not super precise. It was more loose. And so I might be able to go that direction, try to go a little bit more Frazetta, Williamson-esque than I've been doing with the Kit Carter stuff. That might actually work out. I've never totally inked an issue of anything just with pen. And the closest thing I did was my my Legends of the Dark Knight story, but that was with an actual crow quill pen that you dipped in ink. Um, which I always end up having like some sort of, splattering issues or things like that. Um, because one of those, if those pens like catch on a snag on the paper or something like that, you can splatter. And so these pens obviously eliminate that problem. And again, I think when this gets colored and printed, you're not going to be focusing on any one little detail in the town. You're just going to sort of accept it as this old Western town, and all these little elements combine together to make up that town. But I love this idea of this feeling of getting to draw with the ink instead of just, you know, tracing, right? Isn't that the big joke that, you know, people would always say about inkers? Oh, you guys are just tracing. But a good inker always brings something to the table. And I would never insult a good inker by calling them a tracer, because they're not. But when you do really tight pencils and you do really precise inking over the top of those really tight pencils, and in some ways you're adding some line weights and stuff, but there's a lot of tracing, and it becomes this technical skill as opposed to an aesthetic artistic expression. And when I'm doing more drawing with the ink, I feel more like, I mean, I used to hate to ink my own stuff because I just felt like I already drew this and now I got to go over it again and make it exactly like, the pencils were and everything. But if I go in there and kind of do this loose, then I get to draw with the pen as well. So it's like I'm continuing that process of drawing that I enjoy so much. Um, see, look how you can't really see it that well, but this line is very rough. It doesn't have to be this perfect oval curve, right? Um, and so I'm not spending any time worrying about that stuff. It's very, I mean, I can't even describe it. It's just, if you work this way, you know what I'm talking about, but it's just really liberating to kind of go in here and say, well, I don't have to worry about every line being exactly right. And I don't think it's a compromise to the art. It's just a different approach, because clearly there's plenty of detail on this page. It's not like I'm, scribbling. Um, I'm gonna make a few crosses up here so we can tell that this is a graveyard way up here. Now, the interesting thing is when I erase the pencils from underneath this. This is going to be, there's going to be some touch up that's going to be required because, you know, the line work that I'm seeing, or what looks like maybe it's filled in a little bit, is going to become a lot sparser once the pencils are taken out from underneath it. To a certain degree, I almost feel like, gosh, I should just leave the pencils in there. It just adds to the, you know, the roughness of what I'm going for. But some of it gets a little too messy though, so I don't know that I can do that. But anyway, I want to point out one other thing here. So that's pretty much it, right? So, but I do want to point out, okay, so you got this little girl, right, who's, I don't know, 7, 8 years old, right? And again, storytelling wise, it's not necessarily integral to the story, but it's like trying to capture more of a realistic or believable or layered approach to who this girl's character is. Now, she only appears on this page, right? So she's only significant on this page as a girl in the town. But rather than just having her stand there, I had her playing around with this pole like any fidgety 7 or 8-year-old would. So she's leaning on the pole here. And then he says, you know, who's that up there on the hill? And what does she do? She grabs onto the pole and sort of gets on her tiptoes and leans over to kind of look. Oops. See if I can get in there. Yeah, it's as close as I can get. I'm going to bring this in a little bit. Okay, so she grabs onto the pole and leans to look up the hill at what the sheriff's pointing at. Okay, and now she's still hugging that pole because, I mean, she is talking to a stranger. She doesn't know if this guy's the sheriff or not or anything about him. She's very precocious, but at the same time, she's, you know, hanging onto that beam. And then she makes another comment and she's just still hanging on it, leaning back like a little kid might be doing, as opposed to having her just stand there. This sort of animates her character a little bit and hopefully makes her character a little bit more believable, you know, as she's interacting with her environment, you know, and acting in a way that a young child might, you know, because anybody that's had a, you know, that has kids or has had a conversation with a little kid, they don't just stand there and talk to you. They start grabbing stuff that's in there around them, you know, climbing on stuff while they're talking to you. And so that was kind of the feeling I was trying to convey with this little kid. Let me see. What have I missed here? There you go, Prater. As a fan, I say that art is preferred over perfection. Exactly. Dropping that knowledge like his hair. Ooh. Maybe maybe leg kick would like to drop. Oh, David Brohock is here now. We'll get the, okay, yeah, we saw that. Joe Bernardo says, Bob Layton always told me that the subject matter dictates the tools you use. Tech, Mac, and blogs use straight edges, organic, older stuff. You can freehand lines. Is this the method I use? It is now. I never did before because I was always too scared to freehand stuff, you know, and I wasn't inking myself. When on a monthly book, you can't ink yourself because unless you're super fast, and most people aren't. So you're more worried about, you don't want the inker to screw up your pencils, so you go super tight, right? And then of course the inker goes in and goes super tight. So unless I specifically told the inker, hey, freehand this. But when you're doing superhero stuff, you're generally, you know, in a metropolitan area, right? So you have buildings and a lot of straight edges and a lot of clean lines and that type of thing. Unless they're out someplace where there's rocks and stuff like that, and then, or wilderness or trees, and then you're going to have your inker's going to freehand, obviously. Yeah, that's pretty amazing. Golden is like, you know, he's next level though. And that's interesting you should bring that up because Golden, if you look at his hardware, even like his trucks and Jeeps and things like that, they have personality to them, almost like animated in a way. Even his GI Joe stuff. I mean, the Jeeps and the guns and everything are perfectly accurate. I mean, they're totally accurate because he's really a stickler for that. And yet he draws them in a way, as David says, freehands, apparently, that in a way, and so those things become alive. They become, maybe puts a little bit of bend into the Jeep as it's going over a hill or something, like, catching air or something like that. And it just makes everything so much cooler looking. And, but I've always been scared to get that kind of looseness, if you would. Yeah, that's a very good point. You know, Plug. If you look at Mike Plug and some of the stuff he did with, uh, like when he was doing Weird World and those elf stories for Marvel, and even when he does his own stuff, even like his designs for Wizards, the movie, and things like that. He creates these like little elf huts and stuff that are built in trees or maybe the side of a cliff, or they're piled on top of each other. It's all freehand, right? Totally unstructured, like Lord of the Rings type stuff. And for me, I mean, I couldn't do it as well as Plug. I mean, he's just masterful at it. But if I was designing that stuff, like if I did like a city that was up in the trees, right? Before, I would have like perspected that, all done perspective with a ruler and ruled all that stuff in, and then you'd have all these like perfectly constructed looking little elf homes, which is just absurd, right? So I think I've got to a point now, and this is really going to help me in that regard, that I can go in, and if I were to do something that was fantasy related, I could go in and freehand and start creating homes and stuff that have character and life to them, as opposed to just being these cold, hard, straight lines that are perfectly in perspective. Um, turn your panels into NFTs. Still, my brain is still fried from last night. See, he's trying to cause trouble, and I'm just ignoring him. And he's like, wow, Aaron is oblivious to the words he's saying. Yeah, he likes it rough, I tell you. I see. I approach these words with a clean mind and a pure heart, Mike. Clearly, you do not. Bill Meachin's in the house. Thanks, Bill, for joining us. Um, what made you not be scared anymore? Did you always? No, I'm still am. Like I think I wasn't sure how this was going to work. I'm fighting through some things right now because this goes against the grain for me. But like someone had mentioned earlier in the chat, when all the lines are sort of a little bit off, nothing seems out of place. And I've had to get to that point, and a lot of it came by the sketching, like I said earlier, that I was doing for this past year, where just everything was loose, right? And I would be doing sketch live streams. I go, oh, I got to get this done in an hour or whatever. So then you start loosening up, and I knew that I wanted to do that because I knew it'd be perfect for this project, and so I have forced myself to do stuff that I wouldn't normally do. And that is like a lot of detail, like on this old gal, for example, these wrinkles and line work and stuff in here. I put that in with a pen because I found myself that if I would go in like and put this dirt in, right? If I was penciling a comic for DC or Marvel, I would like pencil all this, little rocks and things like that, and the inker would come in and ink all these little. But I never erased them. I never went, ooh, that rough area there doesn't look right. I need to erase it. I would just do it with a pencil. Then, so I'm like, if I'm doing that with a pencil and not changing anything, why can't I have the same confidence with an ink line and go in and do it and not change anything? And so it's a matter of saying this is not how I usually do things, and so it's not comfortable, but I'm making myself do it, and the more that I do it, like I said, we're on page 12 now. The more I do this approach, you start looking at it and going, this works. This is working. This looks the way I want it to look. And then you get confident and feel better about going in and freehanding this entire town with, with my pen as I just did. It's just changing your mindset. And you do that through, like anything else, through repetition and through practice. And I got most of that practice in by doing a ton of sketches on live streams over this past year. Yes. Yes. So scary. Oh my gosh. If I was not on this earth, who would David be tormenting? I don't know. He'd be lost, I think. Oh, Ralph Meyer. I'll check that out. But see, Mobius was a guy that, and Mobius isn't an influence on me at all, but it was a guy that was like a lot of, freehand stuff, and it's just different line quality. Bill's right. Sometimes you do just have to let it go. And that's kind of the thing. I mean, Hillary Barta told me this a long time ago. He's like, quit focusing on one line, or these three feather lines in this one panel, and look at the entire picture, look at the entire page. What are you trying to convey? And I always thought, well, come on, that's just an excuse to be sloppy or whatever. But I'm starting to, as I get older, I'm starting to understand what he was talking about. When I went to the first con, all I heard was steer clear of Goldeneye, and I didn't get it. I didn't, and I got a print and he signed books. But why was I told to steer clear of him? I don't know. I know Michael really, really well, and he has kind of a gruff exterior. At least he used to. He seems to be getting more pleasant in his old age. But um, I don't know. I think probably he used to be a little bit standoffish, and for a variety of reasons. And I'm not going to, you know, get into the psychology of Michael Golden. I'll let him talk about that himself. Um, uh, but he's really a great guy. Once you get to know him and he like feels he can trust you, he's a really great guy. So I don't know if people had bad experiences with him, early on, because he didn't used to do a lot of cons, and now he does a ton of them. So maybe he just wasn't, I don't know. I honestly don't know, because I would never have said that about him. We all are, brother. We all are. Um, you know, I'm going to address this one more time. I got robbed. I'm bitter. I am so competitive, even for something as friendly as that. It just ticks me off that I didn't win. But uh, no, I'm a huge fantasy fan, and but I don't know that there's a huge market for that stuff, so that keeps me from doing it. But I've shown you guys this before. But look at that. That's a Buscema page from Weird World. It was like that elf story, written by Doug Mensch. It was penciled by Buscema, inked by Rudy Nebres, and colored on the page by in watercolor by Peter Ledger, hand colored. So that's not an overlay. That's an actual colored page from Weird World. That was a Marvel Super Special magazine from 1978. So I got a page from that. And then that right over there, you can't really see it all that well, but that's a page from Marvel Premiere number 38, which is Weird World story that was a fantasy elf story. It's the same characters and stuff from the other pages I showed you, but this was in Marvel Premiere, and it was Plug inked by Alex Nino. So yeah, I'm a big fan of that type of stuff, but I just don't know that there's a big market for that, so I've sort of shied away from it, doing it. Um, John, Buscema. Big John. There you go. Danky Frank is on my side. Recount. See, Joe's always got my back when it comes to David Williams. He's always got my back. David says, I would find you on every plane of existence just to torment you. Uh-oh, look at that. See, Eric Johansson, he's in Irene's corner. So you did a great piece. You really did. Someone needed to break in like Kanye West did for Beyonce, but Aaron did. Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. You're talking about the sketch off. John Buscema is always the right answer. You're correct. All right. Well, guys, I wanted to make sure that I got this page done today, and I thought, you know what? I'll just do it live, and we'll talk about the storytelling and stuff. And I'll hold it up again here. You can kind of see how that works out. So we're on page 12, so that means I'm about a little more than a seventh of the way done with the book. But hey, so the next scene right after this is a really cool page that features the Wraith and Esther again, but I'm not going to show it to you. So I'll try and find pages as we move along. We get some light on me. Ooh, now I really look pale. I'll try and find some pages as we move along that I can show you guys that aren't going to necessarily ruin the story. So that you'll know that I'm actually am working on it. I'm not just talking about working on it. I actually am working on it. I was there, Aaron. I voted for you. I'm from Chicago, but the first time I was only allowed to vote once. Yeah, well, I guess that's fair though, right? You should only, one vote per person. But yeah, it was a tough night. It was a tough night, Halloween night for me. Now, what's this? A guy who worked on The Simpsons said that Claremont was saying derogatory things about the fans, but when I interacted with Chris, he was very kind and gave me a free signature. I worked with Chris obviously on Excalibur, and I haven't talked to him much since, but we talked quite a bit, and he always seemed like a really nice guy to me. So, I don't know that I've ever said to anybody, "Hey, don't go near that guy. You'll be sorry," kind of thing. I don't know. I don't know. There's a lot of obviously in this, not just in this industry, but just in culture in general. There's a lot of negativity, and there's a lot of reasons why people will say negative things about other people, and it's generally for their own purposes. Or if someone has a bad experience for whatever reason with somebody, they carry that with them the rest of their life and say, "Oh, don't go around that guy." One time I went up to him and he, said whatever. So I don't know. I mean, I just think you sort of, you have to experience that stuff for yourself rather than listen to, especially when people are talking about someone else or someone else's character, you're better off going and experiencing it for yourself and finding out for yourself rather than listening to them, because there's so much people's opinions about other people are especially on the internet, but even not when you're talking about internet, if someone has a personal experience with somebody that didn't go well for 100 different reasons, suddenly that person's a bad person. Well, maybe not. Maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe the other person that's telling you that person's a bad person did something dickish that got a bad, response from that person. So, that's true. Very true, Bill. Yeah, see, Jeff, at Claremont, he was fabulous. Yes, we're all getting old and bald, aren't we? Well, not Art. Art's getting old, but he's Art to Bear, but he's keeping his hair. So you got to respect that. That's so Very, very true. So anyway, guys, that's all I got for you. I'm going to lay out the next page for this, but it's something I can't share with you because it's too good, and I don't. I want you to have to wait to see it in the book. So, oh yeah, Joe Bernardo got a good review from Neil Adams. How about that? Actually, when I first met Neil Adams, when he was interviewing uh, prospective employees and artists for a continuity studio that he was going to open in LA. I don't know if he actually ever did, but they had the space rented, so he must have. I went in when I was in school down there. I went in and showed him my portfolio, and he wasn't too hard on me. So that he was much worse when I met him professionally, and he lectured me about not charging for my autograph. That was much more uh, intense than my portfolio review. So who knows? There you go. Art dyes his hair gray to hide his supernatural powers. I think you're right. Uh, Please give a shout out to my friend Mitch Stevens, who passed away. I don't know who that is, but there's your shout out, Bill. If he was a friend of yours, I'm sure he was a good guy. And I'm sorry for your loss there. Met Neil Adams 3 times and got an economic. See, that's what it is. It always comes down to the money. It's like, oh my goodness. Yep, yep. Um, that's probably true, but I don't know if I ever even read any of those continuity comics. I just got them for the art. Oh my gosh, there was a character. Um, he was very much like Brohawk Williams. He had a big mohawk, and he was what was his name? It was a Neil Adams. He was kind of a warrior dude. I don't know if he was an Asian dude. He had like this kind of mustache thing, like a Fu Manchu thing. They had a mohawk, and there was I he did at least one issue of him. But anyway, Rudy Nebres was doing a book for continuity of this character. Not Shadow. I keep wanting to say Shadow something, but it was I can't remember. But he was like fighting this dragon, and it was just, I mean, it was just crazy good, and it never came out. It was supposed to be like a zero issue for this character, and it was like one of those things. Like I don't even care about the stories in it good or not. The art was just so incredible, and I saw like 2 or 3 pages from this, and I was like waiting and waiting for it to come out. And much like a lot of the continuity books, they never came out. But the Shaman, that's who it was, and it was a zero issue that Rudy Nebres did. And if you can look up, like maybe Google, it's probably floating around someplace, like Shaman, zero issue or number zero Rudy Nebres, and see what comes up, because there was several pages that he had done that I saw that were just spectacular, and I'm so disappointed that it never got beyond that. Apparently, Randy Howell says, "I'm glad the Garbage Man trade bag is coming out through Dark Horse and not Image. How long until Todd McFarlane moves Image to Texas?" Boy, isn't that the truth? But we'll see if that whole union thing goes through. That communist manifesto they put forth. We'll see if they approve it. I can't believe they would, and basically give up power to their company to a bunch of office workers. But that's what they're asking for. So we'll see. Wow, that's like is that something getting a fortune cookie? Great art without a great story is like a plane with one wing. That is fabulous. I'm going to write that down and steal it. All right, I'm really going to roll now. You guys are getting me. I'm like that teacher that is like trying to teach the class, and then someone gets them going off on a tangent, and they never get to the lesson plan. So, but I have to get out of here because I got to go get some lunch, and then I got to get back to work. Well, I know you had said that you were Asian before, so maybe that's what I was getting at, was maybe you've got some, like, insight um, into those tidbits of wisdom, those wisdom literature, if you will. I don't know if fortune cookies were wisdom literature, but you know what I mean. It's 25 years in waiting. I wouldn't hold your breath, pal. Um, yeah, I would agree with you there. I I would agree with you. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. Um, okay, seriously, okay, that's it. I'm gone. I'm out of here. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it. It was great fun, as it always is. Watch the professionals tonight. I believe Andy Smith is hosting on his channel. We're talking about the 4 artists we would put on Mount Rushmore of comic artists. So that will be interesting. And there's no criteria. So it's, everybody can bring their own concepts and ideas of what they think makes a great comic artist. So that should be a fun and entertaining show, as it always is. Ken is here just as I'm leaving. Good to see you, Ken. Um, and thank you again all for joining me. Like and subscribe if you haven't done so already, and we will see you next time.